Aha.
I decided to stand up at the last minute. Hi, I'm Whitnie Wiley, and that's Robert Hilliard. And we want to thank you for joining us for the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And today we're going to do something a little different. We've been getting questions, and so both Robert and I have been getting questions behind the scenes. And so we thought today we would answer some of those questions that we've been getting. And we encourage you, if you've got questions, to send them to us. But also we encourage you and invite you to ask your questions here live on the program. So if you put a comment in the post where you're watching this video, we'll be able to see them in real time, and we can answer or attempt to answer your questions, or we'll put the questions out there and invite others, you and others, to answer the questions. We by no means have all the answers.
No.
We have answers. We don't have all the answers, and we welcome your insight, your wisdom into the things that we're talking about, which is all things leadership. So with that, I'm going to launch with a question. We'll let Robert start off by answering the questions, and then I will add in. Robert, just so you know, and if you've been watching us for the past couple of months, Robert is the real academic between the two of us. Robert remembers everything. Just a little bit of background. Robert and I were in a master's program together for organizational development and leadership. And Robert still remembers like the class that we learned the principle from this program. And I'm just like, yeah, I remember like something like that. I'm a resource girl. It's like, well, I look it up. I'm a trained lawyer, and you don't have to know anything as a lawyer. You just need to know where to find it, right? So that's been my approach. But Robert really is the one who he's the glue in this team of ours, and he remembers things. And if he doesn't remember it specifically, he remembers where to find it. And I'm just like looking through stuff until I see it. So we're going to let Robert.
It's a blessing and a curse.
So we're going to let Robert start by answering the questions, and then I'm going to add in. So not saying I don't know anything. I do know some things, but Robert is the brains of this operation. So with that, let's start with a question I get a lot. I know you get a lot. And as an audience member, I'm sure you've gotten this question a lot as well, or have seen it. And so we're going to start here, sort of laying a foundation. What's the difference between leadership and management?
Leadership, that's a great question. Leadership are all those, how should I say this? Tactical things, those strategic things that you're doing, things like that have processes around them, like making sure you have a human resources management system in place, making sure you have an attendance system in place, I know you're laughing at me, all those things, all those processes. Management is making sure those processes run efficiently. Leadership, so it's about processes. Leadership is about people. So leadership is about motivating and inspiring people to get behind your vision, to share their values, to buy into the core values of the organization, to be involved in the culture. Leadership are all those things that you use when there are issues with any of those things, any of those people things that you're dealing with. Management usually deals with the processes.
So when someone is saying, I'm a part of management, I'm a part of my company's leadership, how does that translate into something that people can understand, like in a practical sense?
So, well, when they're part of leadership, that usually means they're part of a leadership team. So if they're talking about taking an abstract idea and making it a strategy, then they are part of leadership. Okay. So saying that, not all managers are leaders and not all leaders are managers. Some managers just do the process thing. They don't want to talk about any feelings. They don't want to talk about, they think that you have a job, you should be motivated to do your job. They're not going to have those conversations with you at all. A leader will know when to have that conversation. So I think that kind of answers your question.
It certainly answers the question. It's not my question, but yes. So I would agree with you. I think when we think of managers, it would be nice if all managers were leaders, right? It's not necessarily so that that all leaders need to be managers, but it would be really great, I think. And we've been talking about this for years between us and others, but on our program for the past couple of months, is that sort of the management mentality, the worker as a machine, it's about the process. It's about just getting it done. You have a job, just do it, keep whatever else is going on with you to yourself. That is not about the whole person, right? That philosophy is sort of an antiquated philosophy as it relates to dealing with people and on the leadership side. But there are lots of people, managers, who still have that, whether they are simply old school and that's where they started in their youth and they brought that along with them, or younger people. Quite frankly, I've run into some younger that I would have thought wouldn't have that approach, but they do because that's how they've been managed, right?
Mhm.
That's how they've been related to in their jobs. And we tend to repeat the things that we know, right? We
Right.
repeat the behaviors that we are familiar with. It happens in families, it happens in teams, it happens in groups and organizations, and it certainly happens in the workplace where you do what you know. And the reason that you know it is because someone else did it that way. And so if I get a promotion and from someone who does it a particular way, I'm going to think, well, that's the way I should do it. So I'm going to repeat that. And because I got the promotion, because I did it that way, I'm going to continue to do it that way. And somehow it becomes a part of our identity that this is how we do this.
Right.
Cool. So the next question is, what are some common leadership theories and how can I benefit from knowing about them?
Well, there's lots of different theories. I usually start with the first one, which is the great man theory, right? Which is that it takes a certain type of person to be a leader. And I like to debunk that because everybody leads in some capacity in their life. So there are some skills that you can learn that will help you be a leader. That's the first one. Then one of the ones I like is, the psychodynamic approach to leadership. And that is that the leader is like the parent and everyone else are like the children. And, of course, it doesn't work like that. We're all adults. And when we approach things that way, it usually creates some kind of hard feeling. So one of the things I think to know these theories is to know them, to look at them. You don't have to study them, very academically, but know the basis behind those theories and see whether or not it will work for you and whether or not it is true for you. And so one of the things that I like to use these theories for is to look at the situations where they are actually happening. And it helps me as someone who goes into organizations and helps them say, okay, I know why people are reacting in the way they are. is because this leader is using he's not calling it a psychodynamic approach, but he's approaching it like they are the parent and everyone else are little children that can't make decisions for themselves. And it's creating a lot of friction there. So that's one of the ways that you could use these tools. Another one is transformational leadership, where you actually work with your group to create leaders. So you take your team members and you do the things necessary to allow them to become leaders in their own right. I really like that theory because it really helps you look at each team member's strengths and weaknesses and helps you help them utilize their strengths in a way that helps the organization. And you can take their leaderships and bolster their weaknesses and bolster them so they are no longer weaknesses. So it helps you look at each person critically and look at whether or not they can be leaders of the organization in the future. So those are three. There are many different types of leadership theories out there, and they help you in different ways. One way I use them is to see what's going on. If there's some hard feelings going on, I can pretty much pinpoint what leadership theory is being used by that leader and the effect that it is having, and then make some suggestions about different types of leadership processes to put in place that will help the organization.
So, as you said, there are lots of different leadership theories, lots of different leadership styles. And I think my favorite is situational leadership, right? The situational theory, because it allows you and in fact requires you to be adaptable, to change and use what's appropriate in the moment. And I think one of the challenges of, and I think everyone should learn their leadership style. I think you should study, as Robert said, lots of different leadership theories. But I think the challenge is once you understand your leadership style, you sort of relax into it and go, well, I'm this kind of leader, so this is how I do things, rather than being flexible and adaptable for the situation. And so if you could decide that you are a situational leader, right, you're going to use situational leadership theory, then that allows you to pick and choose in the moment what's right for the situation, what's right for your interaction with someone that you are leading. And it's the same thing as if you're a parent or if you have friends, right? Because everybody's not a parent, but I'm pretty sure everybody has friends.
We would hope.
But what?
We would hope.
But I'm pretty sure everybody has friends, at least one friend, at least two friends, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not the same. And so your interactions with them are not necessarily the same. And so I have two sisters and a brother, and the way I interact with them is not the same, right? The relationships I have with each of them are their own unique individual relationships. And so the way I relate to them, interact with them is different. And that's what I would suggest that you explore as a leader, that the way you interact with the members of your team or the members of the staff, if you run an organization, as it is to understand who they are, what their needs are, what their styles are, communication styles, work styles, and then work with them in a way that works for them. And that's the way to be, I think, the best leader that you can be.
Absolutely. And let's not forget servant leadership too, the servant leadership theory. And that's an opportunity to really help others, to help let others benefit, putting yourself in a situation where you put their needs before your own as a leader. And there aren't many leaders, I shouldn't say this, but some leaders are not comfortable doing that.
Well, right. And I think there's a sense that, and this may be from old school thinking on this, is that I have to, if I'm not asserting my authority over them, right? If they think that somehow I'm equal to them or beneath them, I won't be able to get from them what I need. And that goes back to your comment at the very beginning about the difference between management and leadership, right? That it's not about that at all. Your leadership, regardless of what theory you are under or what style you have, is about empowering and lifting up your employees or your staff or your team members, that you are there to help them be the best that they can be, so that as you move collectively towards your shared vision, everyone is bringing the best parts of what they have to offer to the effort so that you can get there. You are better together, right? It's not just some, what do you call it? This is not a slogan, right? It is the truth that if you're doing it right, you are better together, and because everyone is bringing the best parts of them. But the way you get the best parts of people out of them is knowing who they are and helping them to discover that.
Absolutely.
So how could leaders encourage creative thinking within their organization?
You've heard me say this, I don't know, hundreds of times. By making it okay to make mistakes. You can't be creative if you're being so safe that you're worried about making a mistake. Many innovative things have come from mistakes. And so I think that's the first real step. And then when there is a failure, taking a look at it and trying to figure out why it failed. And going back and re-engineering it so that you can have more success. Or maybe the failure is something that you could use. I use the analogy of Post-it notes. Post-it notes is one of the most successful failures of all times. The person that created Post-it notes was trying to create a super strong glue, but they created a super weak glue, right? But they, and then somebody said, well, they wanted to, I think they were in the choir in church, and they said, a couple of years later, they were like, I need something so I can put some notes on my music. What about that super weak glue that you created? And then they combined it with paper, and now you have Post-its, and they're everywhere, right? But it was a mistake. It was a failure, and I can't imagine the billions of dollars that I think 3M made because of that failure.
I will say this. I have some notes of some sort with super weak glue, and it's weaker than 3M.
I don't even know if this is. This is from Post-it. I think 3M was the person. No,
it is 3M. But I have this. I bought this calendar, and it had a strip of Post-it notes, right? And we use that term generically, like Kleenex and some other things.
Yeah.
But it had this strip that made sense when I purchased it, but they are useless. They are they are absolutely useless. There's a Viagra is another one of those things, although I think they still use it for its intended purposes, and just found out it had other purposes. But you're absolutely right. Being willing to allow mistakes to be made allows people to walk into a situation without fear of the failure, without fear of reprisal or retribution or retaliation for making a mistake. And I am one doesn't believe that there are mistakes. Those are lessons that are learned that move you in the direction either of figuring out something else to do with the mistake, right? Post-it notes, or that you keep working until you get where you're going. The light bulbs, for instance, right? And the story of Thomas Edison or Benjamin Franklin or whoever invented the light bulb. 10,000 times, Thomas Edison, 9,999 times it didn't work. And on the 10,000, whether that's the exact story and number or not is irrelevant, but it was continuing to work at it and learn something from each iteration until you get where you're going.
Yeah, you're crossing those things off the list that don't work. Yeah. Or maybe tabling things that won't work for now, or you haven't found a use for. And then later on, you may use it. And you have to be willing to do that. And also, I think, to be able to accept ideas from other people when you have an idea that may be good, to be able to accept an improvement from someone else. I'll never forget one time I had a boss that was asking for some ideas, and every time he gathered the team together, there was this big meeting that he wanted to have, but every time we said something, his answer was, "That won't work here." So after the third question, no one said anything, and he was completely frustrated, trying to have a meeting where no one would talk, because we're like, well, what's the purpose of saying anything? Because every time we say something, you're going to shoot us down. So it didn't go as intended because it wasn't a safe environment to lend ideas or to improve ideas. And that was a huge lesson for me.
Creativity needs a safe space. I was talking with a new client yesterday, and we were going through, some of the information that she had provided to me in her intake documents. And one of the things she said was that she wasn't creative. She's a lawyer. And I'm like, lawyers are really creative.
Especially when it comes to the law.
Exactly. And that was exactly my point. So I walked her through this exercise. She'd had a win. And this win, I asked her to walk me through the process and what she did and what she was thinking. And at the end, she was like, "Oh, I am creative," right? And I think she was conflating, and I still think she needed challenge on this as well. She was conflating creativity and artistic, being artistic is the way I want to put that. Right. And so in her mind, creative, well, I can't draw, I can't paint, I can't, make music, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, first of all, those are not necessarily the same thing. And two, your definition of artistic is different than someone else's. And so we talked about the example, if you had two houses that have the exact same floor plan and two different families moved into, they're going to decorate those houses totally different, very different aesthetics. Yeah. Right. But in their doing so, using their creativity, if I walked in and I liked one and not the other, it doesn't mean that the one I didn't like wasn't creative or artistic. It just meant it wasn't my style.
Right.
Right. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. And we've got to get away from feeling like that we're judging everything. And so it's one of the reasons that I talk about lessons instead of mistakes or failures, is they're just opportunities to learn. Right. And instead of putting a judgment on it, which, sort of cuts things off, right? And people feeling judged at some point, it's like, well, I just won't contribute.
Right. And yeah,
it's helpful.
Yeah. And why can't there be degrees to creativity? Why must you either be creative or not creative? Right? Maybe you're a 3.1 on the creativity scale, and you can increase that creativity.
Exactly.
But people usually look at it like, I'm either creative
or I'm not.
Or I'm not. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And I was truth be told, I was one of those people, logical, analytical, not creative, right? Not artistic. Can't draw a straight line with a ruler. That was sort of my mindset. And then I was like, no, that's not true. I'm a problem solver. And I started seeing problem solving as creative thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then that was like, well, you're a creative thinker, and you can be situationally creative or artistic, right? There, like you said, there are degrees. It's a continuum.
Sure. Right.
Cool. So here's a question. I'm a new manager and haven't received any training or help yet to do the managing part of my job. I assume that means there are other things besides people.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest I do to be a good manager and become a leader?
Yeah, first of all, realize that you're not alone. That's millions of people are in that situation. Thousands of people are in that situation. They get a job and like, okay, you're on your own. And this is a question that I get asked a lot. And what I like to do with this question is go from the very least thing that you can do to the grandest thing you can do, right? So first and foremost, ask someone for help. You can find someone who is, you came from being a frontline, worker, and now you're a manager or a supervisor. You have new peers. Reach out to your peers. It costs you nothing, maybe a little bit of your pride, but they will see that. Usually, what they see that as a compliment, for them, that you want to reach out to them. That's one thing you can do. You can try to get a mentor. See if someone is willing to mentor you on an official or unofficial basis. Usually that person is a level higher than you or several levels higher than you, who can walk you through, show you the ropes. Get some books. There are thousands of books out there on management and leadership. And you see, I'm going from cost nothing to cost you more. Okay, so get some books. There are tons of books out there on management and leadership. And then you can also go and take some training courses. There's some training courses out there. There are some certification courses out there. That's a little bit more of a commitment. And finally, you can go back to school and start, getting that formal education. And that will do a lot of things for you. It will give you the information that you need. You can also look for opportunities to put your new learning and new information into practice in your new job. And you will meet people, you expand your network, and they can help you. Like I met Whitney in grad school, and it expanded my network. I met a lot of people that I went to for advice whenever I had issues. You can also get a coach. There's a ton of things that you could do. Those are just a couple.
Absolutely. It is. My thing is that your career is your business, right? So whether your organization invests another dollar in you or not, if you are doing a job, if you have a position as a manager, aspirations to move up in the managerial hierarchy into leadership, that's on you. That's your responsibility. So one, I appreciate that you asked the question, right? That you are cognizant of the things that are missing in your tool belt or your toolkit, that you recognize that there's something that you could be doing. Don't wait for your company to make that available to you. Ask for it. So Robert outlined a host of things that you can do. You can do one of them. You can do all of them. You can just pick something, start somewhere, take some action, and then ask your company, right? Maybe they don't have a formal program or process to help develop their managers and leaders and providing leadership development and things like that. But that doesn't mean that they won't. And so if you start the ball rolling, make an investment in yourself, and then go to them and say, you know, I've decided to get a coach, or I'm going to take these training programs. Would you pay for them or a portion of them? If they say no, you know, get what you can.
Yeah.
Recognize that there's always something that you could be learning. I start from a premise that if you are, and we'll talk about this more because I've got one other question, sort of a follow-up question, and then one other question that we'll answer before our time is up here. That the way to be a better manager, to be a better leader, to be a better leader / manager, the way to do that is just to be a better person.
It's so hard to do, Whitney.
No, seriously, it's like be a better person, right? Because when you are a better person, all the things that we've talked about are a part of that. Building relationships and building trust with the people that you work with and alongside or work for you. Trust. I didn't say this earlier, I think, but part of leadership is influence. It is about influence.
Absolutely.
It's not about ordering people around. It is about influence. And so how do you do that? And with that, it sort of leads to the final question that we'll ask and answer for today. But again, invite you to continue to send questions to us. We will bring the questions that were sent as a result of the program, the questions that we get as a part of our businesses, individually and collectively, and any questions that you bring to us during the course of the show. So here's one. You talked about mentoring, coaching, and then you talked about resources. So what are a couple of resources in terms of books that you would recommend that someone could use for leadership and team building abilities?
Okay. I have books, right?
The one thing I know you do have is books. Yes.
I have books. So I think one of the books that I constantly recommend to people, because I've coached many people who are, managers for the first time or been managing in other organizations, come to a new organization, and then they all of a sudden they have problems. So the book that I recommend in that case is a book by someone called Michael Watkins, and it's called The 27 Challenges That Managers Face. I think he chose 27, probably because it's easy to remember that. I never forget that. And it's really interesting because the very first challenge he has in that book is, you're a peer and now you're the manager. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge in the book is you're coming from the outside to a new team. So I recommend that book. It's very, very, it's easy to read, and it's laid out really well. The other book that I would recommend to somebody is, especially when I find myself recommending when they're promoted, is called The First 90 Days. And that is from Harvard Business Review Press. They have, tons of books. If they have a book for nearly any challenge you're going to find as a leader or a manager. So I highly recommend their books. And that book is really, really helpful. And I made a mistake. The First 90 Days is Mike Watkins. The 27 Challenges That Managers Face is by Bruce Tulgan. So I get them confused because I do recommend them both a lot. Another book that I would, and he said two, I'm going to give four. Another book that I would recommend is Introduction to Leadership by Peter Northouse. And I found out about that book because the big brother of that book is the book that Whitney and I had to read for grad school. And then I stumbled on, I said, oh, there's a book before this, an introduction to leadership. And it's great because it has a bunch of surveys. You will find out your leadership style in that book. It has an online resource with it. So there are other tools there. It tells you how to use leadership theories, and it's a very, very good resource to have. And then the last one that I usually recommend is Crucial Conversations. And there are a lot of authors on that book. I think there's 4 authors, maybe 5, I think 4 that wrote that book. And one of the reasons why I like it, although Bruce Tulgin's book does have a section on dealing with having difficult conversations, Crucial Conversations is a whole book that's dedicated to that. And so if you start with those 4 resources, they pretty much have you covered for many things you're going to encounter. So I find myself recommending those.
I love those recommendations, and I'm going to add a few. What we will do is put the titles and the authors in the post so that you have them available to you. So I'm going to start with things that are not leadership specific. So again, my philosophy is when you're a better person, you are a better leader. It helps you to become a better leader. And so the place I'm going to start is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's about how to be successful in life, how to navigate and negotiate your way through life is the way I would characterize that. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Leadership is about influence. And so it's important to understand how influence actually works and how you can do it well. And then one that I'm going to suggest that this is the last one sort of about people or about you is The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. There are 67 principles in that book. It's an easy read. Each principle has a chapter, provides great examples of how to put that principle into practice. And it's just about being a better you and helping you to get from where you are to where you want to be. And in that respect, I want to tie this back to our show is called The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And Robert and I have a program that we're developing. It's called the Simple Leadership Method. And SIMPLE is an acronym. We've talked about it before. It's self-awareness, intentionality, mastery, purposefulness, leverage, and energy. And those are components that as you develop yourself with these 6 components, help you to be a better person so that you can, in fact, be a better leader. And one show we'll go into that in a little more depth, but I wanted to put that out there. And understanding, again, who you are, that self-awareness piece is so crucial to you being a good leader. And then the last book that I want to mention today, I could go on and on, is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni.
Great book. Mm-hmm.
And it was another book that I was introduced to, at least in our grad program. Mm-hmm. And it's an analysis of what makes teams work and why they fail, right? And so the reasons that teams don't work, lack of trust. We've talked about this before. If without trust, you cannot have a team. Fear of conflict, lack of commitment to what the team, the group is working towards, right? That shared vision, there's no commitment to that. Avoidance of accountability and inattention to the results. So all of these books, the ones that Robert mentioned, the ones that I mentioned, are intended to help you to be a better person, to get clear on what your role and responsibility is as a leader, A lot of these apply to your role as a manager, but if you want to take that and move it from being a manager to actually leading people. And the simple way to think of it is managers get to tell people what to do. Leaders inspire people to do it without being told.
Yep.
Right. And if you could think of it that way,
yeah,
then I think that if you decide that that's the kind of leader that I want to be, that these are some resources that you can use to do that. So we want to thank you for joining us here today. We are here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. However, we will not be here next Thursday because next Thursday is a holiday. So if you're watching this in replay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But if you watch this and you think, oh, I want to join them next Thursday is Thanksgiving. We will not be here, but we will be back on the 2nd, I believe it is the 2nd of December, with another great episode and conversation about all things leadership. So thank you for joining us here on the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond, and have a great rest of your week.
Take care.